The days of the cheesy salesperson and that, cliche of the car salesman, those days are over in enterprise sales. Those days are over in really any kind of technology sale. People still buy from people. People still listen to people that really are thought leaders. Like, your people should really be looked at as credible and thought leaders, whether they're salespeople, sales engineers, product people, right? What I do is I put together all the different personas we're going to sell them. And I have columns that say things like, what do they care about, right? What do they care about our offering? What are the things that our offering can do that they would care about? What are the types of questions that are thought-provoking for them? So again, the detail for enterprise, it gets down to that level. It's like you really need to think out each of these things, because if you're this CTO, for example, I only have one chance to get in front of you. I better have done my research on you and what you care about specifically to my offering. And I better hit those points really fast and really clear, right? So it doesn't happen ad hoc. It's not, hey, I'm just going to wing it type of thing. If I'm preparing to meet with Pradeep, then I'm going to prepare my presentation and my value proposition specifically for you.
Welcome to Everyday Leadership. We have an episode that everyone has been asking me for quite some time, and that's about enterprise sales. And a lot of the B2B founders really struggle with where to start, like whether to start with small businesses and then move up the ladder to enterprise, or start with enterprises or come down. And if they were to cherry pick and choose one particular segment, what sort of tactics really help with the sales, and how should they really approach the early sales? So all of these questions are common across a lot of the B2B founders, and we'll try to cover all those questions. And to do that, we have a very, very well-known guest in the enterprise sales, and that's Vince. Vince, why don't we start with a quick introduction of yourself to sort of help us understand who you are and how did you end up where you are today?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show, Pradeep. I appreciate that. So yeah, Vince Beese. I've been in the startup world for the last 26 years. So I guess that makes me a veteran. Some commonality during that period of time is I've typically joined really early stage companies from no revenue to, a few customers to tens of millions. So I've had the whole spectrum. But at the end of the day, I really like building organizations and building processes to create a repeatable sales process. I have sold to SMB and mid-market, but like you've mentioned, most of my career, most of my foundation has been based on enterprise sales. And fast forward to today, I do two things. I run a sales consultancy called Sales at Scale, and we help early stage founders scale their sales, go from founder-led sales to sales-led sales. In addition, I recently announced the opening of Sales HQ, which is actually an environment for co-selling. So think of WeWork, but for salespeople and sales teams. And we're going to have our first location here where I'm based in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. So pretty busy these days, but it's all things enterprise, it's all things sales, it's all things GTM.
Awesome. And can you help us understand a bit of the jargon around sales? Like talk about, explain us what are these different markets and how do we really segment them, and help us understand a bit of sales terminology, who are account executives and head of accounts and account managers and all of that.
Wow, that's a lot. I think the first important kind of acronym that we probably hear a lot is ICP, Ideal Customer Profile. And I bring up that one, Pradeep, because that honestly, when you're going to market, when you're going to sell your product, your solution, whatever it is, you got to know your audience. And if you haven't sold to a specific audience or you don't have customers yet, you as the founder, you as the entrepreneur really need to put a lot of thought into what problem are you trying to solve and who's going to benefit most from that? What companies are going to benefit most from that? What people at these companies are going to benefit most from that? And that's, to me, the fundamentals of getting started is what problem do you solve and who does that benefit? So to me, that's table stakes 101, right? Because that's where founders are going to start. They're going to build a product, they're going to try to solve a problem, and then you have to target that audience, and you have to listen to what they're saying, how they're obviously responding to your solution to solving their problem. So that's awesome. Number one. So you probably hear a lot about sales playbook too. And what does that mean? It can be as simple as complex as you want to, but when you're going from, again, founder-led sales to sales-led sales, You're trying to take the fundamental knowledge that the founder has, and when they go to market, the passion, how they deliver, all that fun stuff. You're trying to make a repeatable process. So when you hire AEs, account executives, or senior AEs, these are quota carrying sales reps that actually go out and do full cycle sale from lead to close. That's an account executive. They have something that they can go by. They have a process that they know how to work to, again, take something from a lead to a close. So the sales playbook, I think, is another fundamental part of what they need. And then you hear a lot about sales process. And what does that actually mean? It's very simple. It is what it is. It's literally choreographing from when someone hits your website, fills out a form, that step all the way to closed one. How do you take them through the process? What are the steps you need to do that? So again, ICP, ideal customer profile, or sometimes called ideal prospect profile. That's important. Sales playbook is another avenue, and there's a whole bunch of things inside that. And lastly, the entire sales process and what that entails. There's a lot of detail, right? When you're going after big accounts. And that's one of the big differences between going after SMB and enterprise. You still follow a process. The steps might be less, the timing might be less, the dollar amounts might be less, the deal might be less complex, and the people you're reaching out to might be fewer than enterprise. But sales is sales. It's just how you go about it is fundamentally different from SMB, mid-market to large enterprise.
Awesome. And what is SMB wins like? What sort of companies classify into SMBs and mid market?
It's a great question. I think a lot of technology companies, a lot of SaaS companies bucket them differently, but it's typically based on number of employees at that company, right? It's all over the map. SMB tends to be 1 to people, something like that. Mid market could be greater than 100 to 500 or 1,000. Again, all depends. And enterprise can be greater than a third. I've seen those ranges all over the map, and it's obviously has to map back to your product and who you're going after in the market. Everyone's market is different, but it's some range based on employees. Another way to do it, I've seen it, is based on the company's revenues, right? So how much revenue does that company generate, and then bucket it that way as well. So that's how people typically break the SMB, mid-market, and enterprise down.
I see. That makes sense. And could we also, talk about selling to SMBs, like from your experience, just help us understand how do we sell to SMBs really? And if you have any examples, specifically interesting stories around SMBs, please share them with us as well.
Well, the advantage of selling to SMB, number one, is it's more transactional. You tend to be able to close a lot faster, and you tend to get to the decision makers a lot faster. Literally, in most cases, the owner of the business, or the person with the most clout at that company, right? And that's why you can turn things around fast. But SMBs, right? When you're an SMB, you don't have a lot of resources. So your product has to be self-sufficient. So if you're going to go after SMB, make sure your website and your product is self-sufficient. They can learn about it. They can sign up for a trial. They can test it out, and then they can put their credit card in and they're off to the races. Some cases, never even speaking to a human being or a salesperson. Maybe they're chatting with you. Maybe they're sharing emails back and forth. Obviously, the great example of this is how HubSpot first started. They nailed this model probably better than any other SaaS company. And once they nailed SMB, they continued to move up market. Now they serve, SMB up to enterprise for sure. But that's the main thing. I think the biggest thing is the product. The product in selling to SMB is different than the product that you're selling for enterprise. Self-service, self-sufficient, self-help SMB. As you move up to mid-market and enterprise, now you're talking about implementation and professional services. It's a little bit more complex, requires more integration, and so on and so forth, right? That's why you have to go from SMB and potentially not speaking to salespeople or people in general. And as you move to the food chain, because it's a little bit more complex, your needs are a little bit more deep in requirements from integration and so on and so forth.
Nice. And yeah, I always wonder how HubSpot went up against companies like Salesforce, especially in the CRM market, whereas the number of features are always saturated, right? So how do you really differentiate? And it's a very interesting story.
But remember, they didn't start off competing with Salesforce. The CRM didn't even come in until later down the path. They started in one thing, which was in the marketing side, generating leads. And then they continued to build product. I mean, what they've done is incredible, right? They went from one product to multiple products up to 3 different markets they went after. So they're unusual, but most founders and entrepreneurs, you need to choose your market you're going to go after. And I think one of the things you said in the beginning is which one should you choose? It depends on your product offering, right? Your product offering might be geared specifically for consumers or for small businesses, and that's what you should go after. Obviously, if you're going after enterprise, your development cycle is going to take a lot longer and your marketing dollars are going to have to be a lot higher to get your brand out there and awareness and so on and so forth. But, I'm biased. What I love about enterprise sales is like one deal could literally make your company. Right? You could just close a $10 million annual deal and it gets you on the map. You close one big logo in a specific vertical, and then you will be able to get others, right? So that's the great thing about enterprise. Longer development time to get your product to market, harder to get in front of people, but the payoff and the margins tend to be a lot greater than SMB. SMB, on the other hand, quicker time to market, quicker usage, understanding the value proposition, what's not, and making those changes, right? So both are great. And anything in the middle is also great, but like the payoff in one customer and enterprise. And the other thing about enterprise is the customers don't churn as often, right? Churn isn't as big of a problem, of course, as SMB. SMB, you got to constantly replenish as people come in and leave as well.
No, that's totally makes sense. And let's also talk about mid-market a little bit. It looks like, is it like a enterprise, or could you just help us understand what's mid-market and what are some ways to approach it?
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid between SMB and enterprise, right? Still has to be feature rich and solve a problem, no doubt. Most mid-market type of products are still probably, there's a light implementation that may need assistance from the company you're purchasing the product from. So there might be a little bit of hand holding and training done there. So it's just kind of think of it as a lighter weight enterprise and a heavier weight SMB, right? This should also explain is your sales organization personnel is going to change. So let's talk about acronyms again. So in SMB, you're going to hear the term SDR, sales development rep. That is your key employee within the organization. Depending on your structure, the SDR might do lead follow-up. They might actually do outbound, and they might actually close as well. Right? They might do everything, full cycle sales. An account executive also could be in SD. An account executive typically tied to a specific quota that they're carrying. Mid-market probably has a hybrid of that. They might have SDRs just for outbound lead generation and inbound follow-up. And then the account executive mid-market is solely focused on building pipe, but also following up from lead to a created opportunity. And then going up the next level to enterprise, you might have varying levels of experience in the account executive position and the SDR position as well, right? Because in enterprise, you might even divide up who you're going after by vertical, by different tiers within enterprise, like, okay, employees and greater, okay, these account executives, these SDRs are going to go after it. So it's a little bit more fine-tuned, but the commonality is the SDR, sales development rep, the account executive, and then levels of experience and management above them, right? So in every one of those scenarios, you're going to have leaders that are there to help remove roadblocks and educate and train the sales force and mentor them along as well.
Nice. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. And now moving on to enterprise, I know these enterprise sales is, like you said, it's a very long and drawn process with multiple steps involved. Could you help us understand those steps, sort of give us a sense of what goes behind the scenes when it comes to an enterprise deal, a typical enterprise deal?
Yeah, again, the steps vary based on who you're selling to and what you're selling and the level of complexity. One of the things I think it's important for your listeners to remember in enterprise sales, it's vital that you're multi-threaded. Do you know what multi-threaded means? So you're going to go after a company, let's call it, I'm making up a name, Exxon. And so when you do your research on Exxon, you need to determine what are the personas within Exxon that you want to go after. Are they by And within those personas, do you also want to go by certain levels? My point is there's multiple roles you're going to go after at an enterprise account that are important to the sales process, right? It's not one person that you're talking to or communicating with that's going to get the deal done. Internally at these enterprises, it's not a one-person decision. It's typically, obviously, 3 to 6 people are involved and greater are involved in the decision process. So it's important in sales and in your process that you're mapping out the personas that are important to get involved into the sales process. And to me, you're involving these people from the first step, which is typically a discovery process, figuring out if there's a solution fit, right? Do we solve a problem? And is this the problem that we can solve for them? And do we have the use cases to demonstrate for them? And then gathering the needs, what they need to be able to fulfill that solution and solve their problem. and then defining when you're doing your product demos, who needs to be invited to that. I will tell you, for anybody out there, like multi-threaded and making sure early in your sales process from discovery on, the more people you can get to get involved in these meetings, the higher chance you have at closing these deals. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a salesperson stay single threaded through a process only to get to the end near the closing. And because they didn't bring in the other people that needed to be involved, the economic buyer, the executive decision maker, all those different roles. And then it comes to the end and like, guess what? Their champion didn't have the authority. These other people didn't weigh in. They didn't know anything about your solution and who you are and your company is. And then they left it to the end. And guess what? It's too late. Decision's already either put on pause or hold. So the importance of the enterprise sales process is to stay multi-threaded from step one all the way through the process.
And when you say multi-threaded, are you suggesting that we should have some kind of connection from outside with these folks within the enterprise who can really champion
Multi-threaded
this?
means two things: multiple people at that account, and then multiple ways you're communicating with them. Email, obviously, is going to be one. LinkedIn is another avenue, medium that we're going to use. SMS or text messaging. WhatsApp for international clients. So multiple people, multiple ways to communicate. The key is anytime you can get into a messaging thread with one of your contacts or multiple contacts, you've now established a relationship, because texting or WhatsApp messaging is outside of your typical work framework, right? So what does that mean? It means, Pradeep, if you and I are communicating, you're probably going to share more with me in messaging than my work email or other work channels. So that's an example of taking multi-threading to the next level. When you become, I guess, a trusted source, a trusted resource for them, they will begin to communicate with you that way. It's not meant at day one that you hit them with text messages. It's once you've established a relationship. So it's a constant progression of adding more people that you need to speak to and in more ways to speak to them, right?
Yeah. And generally, if a founder wants to sell his software to enterprise, would he be starting with who are the right people? Generally, who are the right contacts? In a typical, let's say, SaaS case, you're trying to sell a SaaS to an enterprise. Should you be starting with the CEO, or who are the right product champions in these cases?
I mean, if I'm a founder, right, because founder generates a certain amount of respect, right? When you're a founder or you're an entrepreneur or co-founder, you get a certain amount of respect. So I would always err on the side of the highest level of the persona you're going after. So if you're selling a product to the GTM side, so marketing and sales, I'm going to the highest leader in sales or the highest leaders in marketing. If it's maybe a smaller-ish company, maybe not large enterprise, I might be going up to the C level. So the title you go after is also going to depend on the size of the company. If I'm going after a company that's 100 employees, well, of course, I'm not going after the C level. I might be going after the VP level or director level of that business, because they're so big and it's harder to get in touch with those higher ups. So it all depends on the company, but go as high as you think you can, right? Because they will always take you in and make the introductions to the other people you get acquainted with within the organization, right?
And let's say, we got the contact, but then would you be preparing pitches for all kinds of people? Let's say if a founder wants to aim at the enterprise, but, wants to build a platform or, create all the material required or whatnot. So what suggestion do you have for someone like that?
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. If you're going to do your pitch, you need to think about who's going to be in the room on the other side. And that pitch better speak to them, what the value is for them in their world, right? CEO, right, looks at the solution a little bit different than the VP at a specific division would, right? So what does CEO care? CEO cares about two things: saving money or making more money. So you better be able to demonstrate that your solution does one of those two things, right? What does the person at the kind of division level care about? Solving that problem that you started the conversation with, right? What does the CFO care about? Money, straight up, right? What are the business terms and how much money am I making, or how much money am I going to save? So you really need to think about your audience and who you're selling to that's in those meetings, and speak to them of how this solution is going to solve their problem. So one of the things I do in my sales playbook is I create something mapping the personas. And what I do is I put together all the different personas we're going to sell, and I have columns say things like, what do they care about? Right? What do they care about our offering? What are the things that our offering can do that they would care about? What are the types of questions that are thought-provoking for them? So again, the detail for enterprise, it gets down to that level. It's like you really need to think out each of these things, because if you're this CTO, for example, I better have done my research on you and what you care about specifically to my offering. And I better hit those points really fast and really clear. right? So it doesn't happen ad hoc. It's not, hey, I'm just going to wing it type of thing. If I'm preparing to meet with Prandeep, then I'm going to prepare my presentation and my value proposition specifically for you.
I see. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And when someone's navigating this, are there any do not do sort of stuff here? Like, can we start with SMB and then go up to enterprise? And similarly, can we start with enterprise and come down to SMBs? Let's say if the ICP did not
Here's
match.
universal, whether you're SMB, mid-market, or enterprise. The number one thing I see all the time is undefined ISP. Let's go back to that, and unclear messaging. Like, for example, I love to do two things. When I go to trade shows, I want to go to people's booths and want to see what they say on their banner. And if I read what they say on their banner and I don't understand what it is they do, then that's a missed opportunity. It means their messaging is not clear. We overthink our messaging, we make it overly complicated. So again, whether you're SMB, mid-market, or enterprise, in addition to defining your ICP, your messaging needs to be clear and concise. And so a 9-year-old could understand what you do. And again, regardless of how complex your product is, even more reason to keep it concise. And I'll say this, that if you're going to spend marketing dollars, that's the area you really need to make sure you have nailed down. Because imagine having bad messaging and you spent all these dollars on advertising or promotion and it's just not resonating with people. So go test out your messaging too, right? On your friend group or your colleagues or whatever it is to see if it's people that don't know anything about your business. If you explained it to them, do they understand what it is? And I can't tell you how many times I first start engagement with a founder on a consulting project, like, tell me what you do. And it's like 5 minutes of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. What is it that you do? We help blah, blah, blah companies do X, Y, and they see these types of results. Oh, I get it. It's got to be that concise. And everybody needs to say the same thing at the company.
I see. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. Yeah, I think it's from the fundamentals, it sort of makes sense. And
it is so fundamental and basic, but it's so overlooked. Go to websites to just look at we could look at 10 websites right now. I guarantee only 2 of them would have that nailed.
Yeah. And one other question is, like, if you're trying to operate in a very crowded market when it came to enterprise, right? So a lot of the other companies will compete with you and they have pretty much have those long list of features that you offer. Do you have any suggestions from your experience and how do you deal with crowded markets when you're trying to sell to enterprises?
I've never not been part of a crowded market. Typically, if you're not in a crowded market, you're either trying to break into a market, right? Create a market, right? And I've only done that once. So most times I've actually been in a crowded market where there's been 5 or 6, top tier type of solutions within that. And I think it's pretty simple. You have to have a differentiated product, whatever you believe your product is and how it's differentiated. Don't worry about what the competition says they are. You focus on what you're good at and what you can demonstrate and prove, right? So don't just say it. You got to back it up with proof and actually your demo and however you show your product. That's number one. Have a differentiated product and be clear again about why you're different and what problem you solve. And that's number one. Number 2 is people. People still buy from people. People still listen to people that really are thought leaders. Like, your people should really be looked at as credible and thought leaders, whether they're salespeople, sales engineers, product people, right? You're there to help the customer solve a problem. And that's the way you're going to differentiate, is you have better, well-educated people that are professional and articulate how you're going to solve their problem for them. The days of the cheesy salesperson and that, cliche of the car salesman, those days are over in enterprise sales. Those days are over in really any kind of technology sale. People just don't put up with that because, as you know, 60% of the decision is already made by the time they reach out to you. They've already researched your company, your website, some of the people there. So now they're really looking for, how are you going to help me, right?
Yeah, completely. And all those things that was said about even the way back in the day, you can rise up in the SEO and then you'll get leads. But it's so hard to rise up in the SEO space because a lot of the other companies are already doing it. It's exhausting. And that no longer works. And write content about it. Go to Reddit and talk about your product. And there is so much already written on Reddit. No one really pays attention to what you're writing. And a lot of these, things just don't work anymore. I think it's like you said, it's always people to people. It's simple messaging.
I believe in automation. I believe in AI in sales, no doubt. And it's the future and it's going to help salespeople be better. But there's nothing more frustrating than you have a person who lands on your website and they fill out a form where they start a chat. And it's a bot and this person wants to speak to a human being. And how fast do you get back to them? Goes back to people again in process. One of the ways you're going to differentiate, if I hit your website and I'm chatting and you're clearly not answering my question, well, you better connect with me ASAP. Or if I send a form in, someone better be following up with me ASAP within minutes or hours at latest, right? And that's what really differentiates people too. It's again, that first contact, right? They said, I want to have a conversation and you've ignored them for 24, 48 hours. There's nothing more frustrating than that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, I test that stuff out all the time and it's still shocking me today because everyone expects the bot to answer all the questions and it can be frustrating at times, right?
Yeah. And couple of things that I've noticed with first time founders is it's sort of common across many of them is they think that they can build a product and hire a salesperson and they'll do the sales for it. They don't understand it's all founder led sales in the early part of a company. And similarly with the growth, I mean, they can bring in a growth hacking person and they'll help you with the growth. So that's, and they start looking for these folks before they even figured out their ICP and product market fit. And hopefully whoever is listening is like Vince said at the very beginning, it's all founder-led sales. And from there, it moves on to sales-led sales.
The number one issue I see when I work with early stage founders is hiring the wrong profile. So completely what you said, they're early stage, let's say they even have a few customers. They go out and they hire the expensive sales leader profile, making it up. Someone that came from Salesforce that managed a 20 million book of business, right? Huge piece of business, had a lot of success at Salesforce. Okay, this person now has to jump into a company that's got less than $1 million in revenue and create a go-to-market motion and execution. And if they've never done that before, they're going to fail miserably. So my point is they fall in love with the profile. They don't fall in love with their experience. And is it relevant to where we are at this stage in our company? And again, to your point, like, yeah, founders have to close the first deals because who else is going to be able to have the passion to be able to do that? Nobody. But once you've figured it out, and it doesn't have to be a repeatable process. Once you kind of figured out that, okay, I know what these people want. I know what pain I'm solving, and here's how we're going to do it. That's when we translate again from founder-led sales to sales. And maybe your first hire is a go-getter, someone who's a younger profile salesperson that wants to learn the business and you can mentor them along, right? Maybe that's your first hire, is someone that you trust that can go to market and start selling, and then you build up, right? I've also seen it where I've been the first GTM hire, the CRO, where I've come in, it was just founder selling. And then I came in and I knew I'd have to sell. So I was selling while I was building the process and then building the team. So you can do it two ways. You just got to be cognizant of hiring the right profile and that they can achieve what you need at the time of where you are at the stage of a company.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Well, with that, we've arrived at the last section of this pod, and I have a series of questions, more like a rapid fire questions. And then, let's start with the first one. The first question is, what is that one favorite book that you would recommend to other entrepreneurs or whoever is passionate about entrepreneurship?
In regards to sales?
It could be anything.
I mean, I love fiction, first of all. I love historical fiction, number one, but that's besides the point. Like any Ken Follett book, read those. I love those. But when it comes to like an interesting book I read years ago in regards to sales, which kind of really defined the different types of salespeople, it's called Selling the Wheel. And it's a really interesting book that, again, it walks you through the different types of salespeople there are. And then you're going to figure out maybe which category of type of salesperson are you. So that was an interesting take on that, I think.
Sales of Wheel, is that what you said?
Selling the Wheel.
Selling the Wheel. Okay.
Selling the Wheel. Yep.
And then who is your favorite entrepreneur?
I mean, I'm sorry, this is going to be cliche too. I mean, Steve Jobs, just because, man, there was no one better standing on a soapbox, right? I mean, nobody. I don't care who. I mean, he's the pinnacle, right? I mean, there's others I really admire and I've worked for, but like, if you're talking about top echelon, if I had to start a company, I needed somebody to come in and do it, Steve Jobs would be my guy for sure.
Nice. And what is that one favorite life hack or life hacks that sort of helped you live a better life?
You're getting deep, man. Jeez. I tend not to be a very patient person. I tend to react and sometimes can be emotional. So one of the things I've learned years ago is keep your emotions in check. So for example, I like to sit on things now. So if I got an email that I would normally react very fast to, I say, I'll read it, let it sit there for 24 hours, let it percolate, and then come back to it. And your ideas and different things like that. So for me, because I'm not a patient person, I've had to tell myself to just, speed isn't my problem, patience is my problem. So for me, the life hack is just chill out, wait 24 hours. And if you still feel the same way about those things, then that's when you respond and that's what you go about.
Absolutely. Very well said. And let's say if someone wants to reach out to you, some founder wants to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you? Help us.
I think the easiest way is LinkedIn. I also have my own website, Sales at Scale, or again, my new endeavor, Sales HQ. So those are the three ways you could reach out to me for sure.
Awesome. And really appreciate your time here on the pod today, Vince. And thank you for answering all those questions patiently. And this was a great learning experience, I'm sure, for a lot of those first time aspiring founders as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.